This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
My guest today is my kind of people, a creative force with many titles. She's a shop owner of preservation, a store that cares about slow fashion, the beautiful brands they support, and the community of customers they serve. She's also a very talented photographer with killer personal style, a mom of two beautiful girls, and she also just happens to be one of my very, very best friends. My friend Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I feel honored.
Oh my God, it's a pleasure to have you.
I've only done one other podcast, and it was with your husband.
That was true. That was with my husband.
In your house.
Yeah, in my house where Amplified started.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy. How long ago was that?
Gosh, probably 6 years ago.
I feel like you didn't even have Georgia. No, you didn't.
Probably not. I still remember something I said in that podcast. My mom still gives me shit about.
What did you say?
I said women,
Oh, don't over.
I said, I'm say it again. I said women today don't care as much about the male gaze. They don't dress for men. They dress for themselves. Whereas women, maybe my mom's age, dress more for men. And my mom was like, "Oh, I just dress for men." She really gave me.
Oh, Mama Lisa.
I was had to re-explain to her, and I was like, "Okay, whatever. You're right. I mean, I kind of called you out,
But it's true.
yeah." And when I think about her as an individual, she really isn't like that.
Right.
I feel
right.
a lot of women in her generation.
I agree.
Dress specifically for men. I feel like now, obviously, it's it's fine if you want to dress for whoever, but I feel like women even younger than me, they just don't. They're just whatever.
Yeah.
It's cool. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think the beauty of style.
Yeah.
Right. You dress for whoever you want, dress however you want. But yeah, I feel like it was just the generation because I feel the same way
Yeah.
about my mom.
Sometimes I feel like it's less about being flattering and how people perceive you, and just more about how you feel in it now.
Yeah.
Women are more in tune with well, I feel good in this. I guess I don't really care if someone else thinks I look good in this or not,
Yes.
Which I don't think was the thing as much.
Is that your style?
I would say
Is that how you base your style on?
a lot.
comfortable?
Yeah. I would say comfortable, feeling, if I feel confident, then that's most important. Being confident is important to me. And if I don't feel good, then I don't feel confident,
Yeah.
But I do like to be comfortable. I mean, you can catch me in overalls 50% of the time. I can go both ways.
You're a farm girl.
Yeah, I'm a farm girl.
You also get that from there.
That's my roots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I never wore overalls when I
when you worked there.
No.
What was your style vibe when you worked the farm?
when I worked the farm. Oh my gosh.
Who were your style icons?
God, I don't even know. I honestly when I was growing up, there wasn't, there was no internet really. I mean, there's no social media. I think, we got the one or two magazines every couple months that maybe my mom picked out that weren't probably that good. There was no style until Delia's came out.
Oh,
And,
yeah,
those,
baby.
those magazines. I mean, until I started watching MTV, that would have been probably, I would say, my first real introduction into style, or movies.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I don't really feel like I had. I would say probably two movies in my younger childhood that influenced me would be Dirty Dancing and Pretty Woman. Actually, those are two.
Oh my God, Pretty Woman.
I know. I watched that movie when I was probably in first grade, which seems highly inappropriate, but
I can say a lot of things I watch
yeah.
that nobody knew I watched.
But the fashion in that movie is so good.
Yeah, that's why I used to watch Sex and the City. I was probably 10, 11, but I didn't even understand what was happening. I
No.
just love the style.
Yeah. I didn't watch that till college. I was late to that.
That was in Mexico, and it was like subtitle
Yeah.
or
really.
translated to Spanish with voices that were really weird, but
Yeah.
it was awesome.
I feel like music. I mean,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, when I was growing up, the style was really bad. It was the height of pop, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, just bad. I mean, it's not even fashion that you look back and you're like, that had its it was just bad. Super, super low rise, bikini tops, sparkle, ooh, it's
It's
more
all
is
coming
more.
back.
I'm not excited
It's
about
slowly
that.
all here.
Oh, gosh. That was probably the most influential in like, high school and
Yeah.
college.
I feel the same way.
I loved Christina Aguilera. So.
Yeah. Since we're talking about, you're growing up, because you own a shop now, but you're a photographer, which you have studio preservation as well. You went to school for photography.
Yes.
What made you decide to go to school for photography?
I took a class. I had enough of my high school credits done that I could take some college courses when I was a senior, and I ended up taking a photography class at this local private college near my house. And it was really cool. I learned how to use a film camera, and I got to meet other photographers in the area, and it felt like something that I could be creative and also have a business, I guess. At that point, I didn't even really know how it would evolve. But at that point, after I took that one photography class, I was pretty sure I wanted to pursue photography. And I was always interested in photos and really capturing memories from a really young age. I mean, I was a kid that would look at my baby album all the time. I still when I go home, I look at albums. I love photos. I love that sort of nostalgic moment in time that you can look back at. Sometimes I feel like that's half the reason you remember things is because of photos.
Yeah.
If you didn't see those photos, you wouldn't really remember it, And so I had heard that Hawkeye was a good college for photography, which is in Waterloo. It's just a community college. You get your associates in applied arts. At the time, it was top 10 in the nation. There was a waiting list to get in. I got really lucky that I was able to get in. I applied maybe in my junior year or something. I don't quite remember how that worked out, but I ended up getting to go right out of high school, which doesn't always happen. Some people have to wait a year, do their gen eds, whatever. But yeah, it was a great program. I don't know. I think once I started taking photos and got into it, I felt pretty confident that that's what I wanted to do. I mean, obviously it's evolved and it's not maybe how I thought I was going to be doing it.
What do you thought it was going to be?
Honestly, it's evolved even from when I started school, when I started college. It's really the college I went to is definitely a technical school. They're not rewarding you for being creative. It's you're being rewarded for following the rules, And so I struggled with that the first year, and I was almost I don't know if I want to keep doing this because it was just it was really hard. And at the time, it was still 100% film. So we shot everything on medium format. We developed and printed all of our assignments and whatever. And even though I loved it, I think, that first year of college is you're so worried about being social and, drinking and doing all the things you probably shouldn't be doing. But then when I came back, I think my second year, you start taking more focus classes like commercial photography, which is where you're doing more product shots and stuff like that. And then you do portrait class and you do a photojournalism class. You kind of get to figure out where, maybe where your interests lie. And I wanted to be a commercial photographer so bad because I wanted to be a fashion photographer. But I just didn't jam with my commercial instructor. Even though I love him now as a student of his, he was so strict and just such a pain in the ass. He just would not really help. He's in his office, he's there to help, but he's not really helping you. It's you'd ask him a question, then he'd ask you a question. And so it was really, and it was really boring. It was take a picture of this phone on a film camera. We were doing, and that was 4x5. So it was your film is literally in this little camera back, and it is 2 exposures per thing. So it's it's insane. It's so old school. It's with the dark cloth over your head.
Oh my God.
So we're taking pictures
cool
of
though.
cereal boxes, we're, it's art. And I did do my first portfolio was all fashion, but I just was kind of maybe I don't really care as much about the product as I do about the people. And then I took my first portrait class, and I was this is I was really good at taking pictures of people, and I really excelled in that class, and I really cared about it, and I got good grades in that class. So I think I kind of realized maybe this is where my focus needs to be. I still, of course, loved fashion, and I wanted to pursue that, but I kind of thought, there's so many famous photographers that are fashion photographers, but really have that portrait feel to their photos. So I really connected to that, Richard Avedon and Annie Leibovitz and
Annie. Yeah.
So that was what I wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to move to New York. I wanted to be a fashion photographer. And I did move to New York.
I was going to say, you did move to New York.
I did. I never ended up doing any photography there, really, like a tiny bit here and there. I ended up getting a job offer back in Des Moines, oddly enough. I didn't even live in Des Moines prior to this. I had some friends that worked at a photo studio, a portrait studio, and they were like, we need someone. And I came back and did an interview, and I got the job. And I kind of think it was like the Midwesterner in me was like, I should probably move back and like get a job and do what I went to school for. Even though sometimes I wish I would have stayed and like tried to pursue photography out there more. Obviously, I'm where I'm supposed to be, but
I feel like you turned out all right.
yeah. But that was kind of the evolution. And then when I got, so then for probably from 2006 to 2010, I worked at two different portrait studios. So I was working in a really traditional atmosphere of like what a portrait studio is. And I didn't do a ton of photography. I did a lot of sales, retouching, ordering, assisting, kind of like back end. Like I kind of was like, you know, that kind of thing. But I kind of learned a lot about running a small business, obviously sales, marketing, all of that stuff. And I did do photography, but I wasn't shooting for the most part. You know, I was kind of doing like back end stuff like framing and everything else besides taking photos for the most part, which I kind of liked, honestly. It was fun. And
I feel like all of those things that you just said have equipped you to run the business that you run now.
Yeah.
So before you had Preservation, your shop, you had Vintage Salvation.
Yep.
Which it was like a series of pop-ups, and you will sell on Etsy.
Yeah.
Right?
So
when did that started?
I started collecting vintage in college, actually. When I was first starting to do like commercial photography, I was really into taking pictures of people and clothes, and I got really into vintage clothes. And back then you could go to a Goodwill and find like really cool like 1950s party dresses and just like really cool stuff. And so I would just like buy these cool outfits, even though I had no purpose. I would just be like, I'll find someone to take picture in this or whatever, you know. Most of my photos in college were of people in vintage clothes because I was just into buying vintage. And so then I just kind of started collecting it and really got into thrifting, and I kind of obviously started wearing it too, you know. It was kind of different. I feel like obviously if you've been into vintage for a while like I have, I mean technically I started collecting in 2003. So over 20 years, I've been collecting vintage. Yes. And it's evolved, you know. It's like back then, people didn't wear vintage. Like most, you were probably like a cool like retro vibe band if you wore vintage. You know, it was so random. And it's changed. Like the vintage style has changed obviously over the last 20 years. But I just started collecting, and back then I mostly sold dresses because I had this one dress form. I didn't use real models, and I could only photograph dresses on it. So. And dresses were relatively popular back then. I feel like a little while after I started collecting, Mad Men became a really big show. It was like super like relevant, you know, fashion and culture. And so all of those like 1950s and 60s and 70s dresses were really, people were into them. Yeah, because of the show. That stuff. But yeah, I started selling on Etsy in probably 2009. Oh. And it was just because
that was just like a side hustle.
Yeah, I was still working at the photo studio. We were about to move to Colorado. I was just about to get married for the first time. And I was like, I really wanted to open a store, but it was at that point, it was kind of like, you know, not in the cards. And I was almost like, who's going to buy vintage online? Like, it wasn't that popular then. Like, Etsy was kind of a no-brainer because it was already a marketplace, and it was really, there was a lot of vintage being sold on Etsy. It was almost like specifically for vintage at
the beginning.
And so that's how I started, and it was actually, that was Vintage Salvation. Which is so funny to think about. I don't think about it that much. Some people still have the shirts and stuff.
I still have the shirt.
Yeah.
And that's how I met you, through Vintage Salvation.
Yeah. And I didn't even start doing pop-ups until I moved to Des Moines, which was in 2012. And maybe my first pop-up wasn't even until 2013, actually.
I feel like maybe 2013 because I met you in 2012. 2013 maybe.
It might have been
I think
2013 because I started working. When I started working for 8/7 Central, is when I feel like I started doing more pop-ups because I just met more people that knew what was going on. And I think my first pop-up was Market Day, maybe.
Oh wow!
Remember that when Market Day?
Remember Market Day?
And I would do pop-ups at my house sometimes. I mean, someone just reminded me. Do you remember when you had vintage in your attic? I would come shop in your attic, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes!"
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't, but I do now. I mean, yeah, I can't even. My whole attic was just like filled with vintage.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
That?
Yeah, I remember that. Do you have photos of that?
I don't think so.
Like
I
photographs
forgot.
of the attic?
I probably do, but when I got divorced, all the photos from that time period and earlier in my life, I feel like I put away in like
I get
on a hard drive.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm sure I have them, but yeah, gosh, it's such a wild memory, like to think about how it started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very, like, I don't like to use this word often, but like it was very organic the way that your grew happened.
Yeah, I mean, I
well.
always wanted to have an in-person store. Even when I started selling on Etsy, I still remember kind of like fighting it, being like, I'd rather sell in person. But it was the best step to start online and like to see what sells and whatever. But yeah, it's crazy. And then obviously, eventually, I was interested in like other things besides just vintage. But
right, that happened until you opened when you opened the shop.
I think I knew when I knew quite a ways before I opened the shop that I wanted to have like modern goods, which is I guess what we just have always called them, but it's like new things basically. I always knew I wanted to be a mix. I feel like the things I've mixed have evolved obviously over the last several years, but I always knew that I wanted to be both things because I just didn't want it to be a traditional vintage store. At that point, especially like when I first was introduced to vintage, I felt like most people couldn't walk into a vintage store and then feel like it was relatable to them. It was like, well, how do I wear this? Like, what do I wear it to?
Oh, so you brought the modern goods to just kind of like, this is how you can put an outfit together. Without looking like
a costume.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was that's how I was wearing my vintage. I wasn't, and people would say that to me all the time. Well, like you can wear it, but like how would I? I couldn't really wear that.
Yeah,
and I always wanted to make the vintage more relative, I guess, to people. I never wanted to have like I guess a traditional vintage store, which you think of like packed with vintage and like it kind of smells and it's
like
cheap.
A Tommy Garage.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Junction.
Like
it's a dream.
It's
a dream archive, that place.
I love going to stores like that, but most people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When do you open Preservation?
2015.
2015.
So we're approaching the 10-year mark fairly
next
quickly.
year.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know. We technically opened in August. We had like a soft opening, but I think our grand opening was in September. So we usually celebrate in September.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
We did open August. I was there to open with you.
I
used to work for you.
I was just showing Lily that video of Azul at the counter, and she says, "Hello, I'm Luca," and then she does her laugh where she's like, "I'm Azul, and that's my mom over there." And yeah, it's so cute.
So cute. They were so little.
She's what, like 4 or 5 or something?
She's maybe like 5. She's like 5. She's now 13.
I know. I was dying. I was like, this is like the beginning days. Right?
Abner told me yesterday she was cleaning her room. Her room was a mess. And I just redecorated her room.
I saw that.
Just like,
looks good.
Or Wednesday, I think. By Sunday, it was trashed. And it's just clothes. She changes like 5 times a day, And I'm like, yeah, it's all clothes. It's just she changes so much. And I was like, well, since she was a baby, she got no choice. No choice to ever be different than she is now.
Yeah.
It's all your fault. It's all of your friends' fault. And then I go back to like Preservation times. And when I used to take her to photo shoots to like model for you or to work when we used to work on those editorials when you brought new collections, she was always around.
Yeah.
And she also didn't have an iPad or didn't have any technology. So she was always watching us. Yeah. Like just taking it all in.
That's crazy to think about that she didn't have an iPad or something.
No,
I can't. My kids are so obsessed with it.
They just gotta watch. like an
Yeah.
Apple Watch, and they're 13, just because I need to communicate with them.
Yeah.
And it took something really tragic to happen in Iowa for me to get them a watch, because I am super anti that. I feel very proud that that's why they're so creative still.
Yeah.
But, now they have a watch. It's kind of cute.
That's it's a gateway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm not a hater.
Yeah.
But kids are cute kids too.
I mean,
I
I hate it, but
they'll
you
be
know
fine.
what?
They will be fine. You have to do whatever is right for your family. That's like the other thing.
Yeah.
I was also able to stay home with my kids for 4 years, to be able to raise them and to be there. I mean, kind of not by choice, because it just didn't work for us,
Right.
for both of us to work. I did a lot of freelancing, and that's why I was also able to take them with me. So they didn't need like this other things,
Yeah.
but
They're
it
so
works for whoever
I know.
works.
It's so cool. They are who they are because of all those things. So I feel
Yeah.
like they're such
Thank you.
cool kids.
Thanks. I
Not
think you're
even
pretty
they're not
cool
really
too.
kids anymore.
They're officially teenagers as of January 8th.
I can't believe it.
Let's talk about what you carry in the store, right?
Yeah.
You were just saying that you also bring modern goods, which is like clothes that is not vintage.
Right. So
Easier to
in the
explain it.
industry, you would call it ready to wear. We call it modern because we feel like that's the easiest way to differentiate for our customer. We've always called it that, even though sometimes I think people get confused about it. But it's evolved. I mean, when you first open a store, you are limited, unless you just have insane connections, you're limited to like what brands are going to let you carry them in the store and whatever. But it was always important to me from the beginning, if we were going to carry new clothes, that they were clothes that were, being ethically made, thoughtfully sourced. There's been so many buzzwords around what I do for the last 10 years. I mean,
Yeah.
green was a huge buzzword when I first opened, or eco-friendly.
Eco-friendly.
Obviously now, like, slow fashion has become more of a mainstream term. Even like conscious, consuming, stuff like that. But I think the longer I've been doing it, the more options there are, and there's more brands that have sort of like really leaned into that.
It's a huge market now.
It's a huge market now. But it's also, there's so much in that realm that's like, I wouldn't say even really true slow fashion.
Yeah.
It's like, I think
Yes.
there's a lot of huge corporations trying to like piggyback off of like people really doing it.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying to slap that like little label on so they can say that they are doing their part.
Yeah.
In my opinion, any brand that like mass produces and overcuts for every season is that you can't,
It's nuts.
you're not in the realm of slow fashion. You just aren't. I mean, most of the brands that I work with, it's like they're making these small, tiny little collections each season. When I order my orders, like I'm prepaying for like at least 30 to 50% of what I would be paying just to get those items made.
So your items getting made.
Yeah.
I did not
So
know
it's
that.
like it was a big thing within the slow fashion industry that they would do that anyways, because that's sort of like all a part of like reducing.
Mm-hmm.
But after the pandemic, it became even more of there was a lot of brands, especially small brands like the brands I carry, that got in trouble because they had people that placed these orders and then they couldn't take the orders and they hadn't paid for them. And so now I can't even, there's maybe a couple brands I carry that don't require deposits to place your order.
Explain to people on easy words
Yeah.
what's slow fashion.
I would say slow fashion is when something is produced, every step of the way it's accounted for. So where the fabric is produced, how it's produced, what's it made out of, because you can have an item that's made really thoughtfully, but then it's made out of fabric that has chemicals in it. So it's like every step of the way, which really there's so many steps. It's like the fabric has to be made, the buttons have to be made, or the zippers, or the hardware, lack of a better term. And then you have to think about the people who are actually making the goods. So it's like,
The garment.
yeah, are they working in good working environments? Are they getting paid a fair wage? And then after that, it's like, how are the garments getting shipped? How or like what we would call like regional production. It's like for the most part, like ideally you source things that are made close to you. Unfortunately, in the slow fashion and really in the fashion industry, like things are made all over, and it's like you tend to, you just like what you like.
Yeah.
We carry a lot of goods that are made in Europe, and it's like it seems to me that there's a lot more European brands that are really committed to the slow fashion movement. I'm getting derailed because you want me to explain what slow fashion is. I would just say slow fashion is like brands being focused on how their goods are being produced every step of the way and being fair to everybody in each step. So it's like, with bigger corporations, the person up top is making so much money.
So much money.
And then you think about like how much that garment costs, and it's like nothing. And then it's like, for me, I'm like, well, how much is the person even making? Whereas
that person that's actually making that garment.
Yeah, we're in slow fashion. It's more about slowing things down, maybe not producing as much every year, smaller collections. So there's limitations on what they produce. Maybe they're using fabrics that are recycled or materials that are recycled. It's just really trying to be conscious about your impact on the environment. I think like anything, in my opinion, about slow fashion, it's like I don't expect anyone to be doing it perfectly. Like,
right.
No one's expecting you to buy all slow fashion goods, all or 100% organic, all the time. It's like if everybody, it's a little bit about consuming less too. It's not just about like what's being produced, but it's about maybe we don't need as much. I mean, maybe if we buy something that's a little bit higher quality and we only invest in that one thing, and just not, it's just.
It lasts you longer, right? Like,
yeah.
But
changing your habits as a consumer.
As a consumer is very important because let's be honest, like slow fashion is not affordable.
It's not. I mean, yeah, it's a luxury for sure.
It becomes a luxury.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be, but explain to us why slow fashion happens to be so expensive.
I think, well, first I want to say slow fashion does not necessarily have to mean new items. So slow fashion can mean clothing swapping, wearing secondhand, thrifting, like shopping on all of these marketplaces now that are selling used clothes. So that's slow fashion. Slow fashion is just being conscious about how, either how the good is being made or how you're consuming the good. So in a way, slow fashion can be affordable. But if we're talking about modern, ready-to-wear slow fashion, I would say the main reason that it's so high-priced is because everybody along the way is getting paid more. So that means the overall price of the garment has to be higher. Once you start tallying up, like, okay, the fabric costs this much, the person who made it gets paid this much, and then, there's like how much it costs to ship it. I mean, and then you're like talking about the brand itself. So you're like, you're paying the designers, you probably have a marketing team, you have to sell your goods. So it's like all the things along the way in a slow fashion brand, they're really taking care of the people.
Everybody can make like a livable.
And most of the time they're
wage.
using products that are better too. The fabric is better. They're probably paying the people who are sewing it or constructing it are maybe like better at what they do, which is why they're getting paid more. And I just feel like there's more thought that's going into it. There's more thought that's going into it every step of the way. And so, that's why. I mean, really, it just comes down to what each person that has a part in that product gets paid, And then at the end of the day, that slow fashion company still has to make money,
Yeah.
Which usually it is a smaller brand.
They're like smaller brands.
Not always. I mean, there's definitely some bigger ones out there.
Yeah.
I mean, we carry a couple that are like fairly large, and I would say like most of what they do is in that realm, but like not everything.
There's a lot of greenwashing.
Yeah.
And the modern goods kind of slow fashion, right? Like, I mean, big corporations throw out there the green logo basically, and they're like, yeah, it is the same, but the T-shirt is $5.99. Yeah. Which means it's not.
Which means that probably they are mass producing that T-shirt, and they're hoping to sell a quarter of them at full price.
Which, by the way, I don't even know why I say $5.99 because nothing costs $5.99 nowadays. Stuff
nothing.
at Goodwill is not even $5.99 anymore.
That's true.
Okay.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of those huge fast fashion brands that have tried to. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's
But
like
are they really trying?
no, they're not. It's a marketing.
It's a marketing
marketing.
tool. Like
It's marketing. Yeah.
it is total marketing tool. If they really care,
If they really cared, they just
they will go to like, they will minimize
they
like their what they make, but also the trends, and they wouldn't
Yeah.
push trends out there so fast
yeah.
as well. But they really don't care. So you already said a little bit like slow fashion also means that you can, shop secondhand or shop in like Depop and all of this other
Yeah.
places that are popping out. That is like a really good way to start being conscious about what you buy,
Yeah.
right?
I think so. I mean, I feel like now more than ever, there's so many ways to like buy secondhand clothing.
Yeah. As a person that obviously has awesome style and you want to shop, how do you like do consumerism? Like, do you like buy one piece and get rid of one piece, or do you
No.
just like kind of like recycle your clothes as you go?
I've kind of gone in waves with this. It's like there was a while where honestly, I really barely took anything from the shop. I would take like maybe a handful of things a season. Mostly because I couldn't
Which you-
afford to, and I was like,
But you had to, because when
Yeah.
you wear stuff, that's when everybody wants it.
yeah. But in the beginning, I didn't really like. I would say even for the first like 3 or 4 years, I didn't really notice that. I didn't really think of that, and I think a lot of it's because I didn't really get on social media until I opened the store. So I was kind of late to the game on that. And I still sometimes feel like it's a little, I mean, obviously I've figured it out, but it's like, it still feels a little foreign to me, like how some people are on social media. I'm like, what?
It changes all the time.
It changes. But I didn't really realize that like I was the sales tool for my store.
Yeah. You still are.
And in the beginning, I mean, I wore mostly vintage when I first opened, and
that.
I really couldn't afford to take the things. I was in my mind, I was like, I have to sell
I
it.
have to sell it.
I mean, I do still have some things from the very beginning that I'll probably keep forever, but I do wear a lot more now, and sometimes it's like if I'm wearing it to a special event and it's like, I'll recycle it back out on the rack. It's like
Yeah.
if I'm just wearing it to show up somewhere. But most of the time, if I take something, it's because I see like I'll wear it again. It has like a feature in my style life,
Yeah.
But I have a really, really small closet, surprisingly, and I have to switch out my clothes seasonally. And so every year when I switch things out, I try to like go through and be conscious about like, what did I wear? What didn't I wear? And then like, maybe like, why didn't I wear that? And a lot of times that will influence how I buy too, because it's like, if I'm kind of like, okay, I thought I was going to wear that so much, because that happens to people too. It's like, you have good intentions. You're like, I love this item. I'm going to wear it so much. And then you don't, then you have to just try and think about like, well, why didn't I wear it? And then remember that, like, that's one thing about being a better consumer is no one's expecting you to be perfect, but it's like, try to think if you made that mistake last time and you like bought that thing, whether it was expensive or not, and then you never wore it, like, okay, why didn't you wear it? Does it make you feel uncomfortable when you wear it? Was it, or it's, I don't know. There's probably several reasons.
So many questions that you can ask
It's
yourself.
not quite the right size.
To me, it should always be how it makes you feel.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Like, that's like the first thing. But
I think since becoming a mom, I've really had to change. I mean, it's like, of course, I was definitely that person before I had kids that I was like, I'm not going to change, my style. But I did, you do. Your DNA literally changes when you have a baby, and you change. You just do.
The moment you have a baby, you're a completely different human than you were.
Yeah, and so I think it's inevitable. And I don't think it has to be for better or worse or whatever.
No.
But there's definitely things that I don't wear as much. And, it's like I wear things to the shop and then I get home, I take them off, I put them in the closet, because it's like otherwise they'll just get ruined. I try not to wash my clothes that much.
Yeah. Which also helps the environment.
Yeah. So it's like if I take them off when I get home, they're less likely to get soiled.
Because you have a 1-year-old.
I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old.
And a 4-year-old.
Who thinks I'm her human napkin.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, her little fingers.
I know,
Sometimes I
everything.
catch myself like with just. Rick's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "She's gonna wipe her hands." I'm
That's
sure.
That's why he always has a handkerchief near
I
you.
know he does.
I love that.
Old school.
I love that, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's nothing wrong with like I also feel like okay, like I don't really believe in trends, but I do know that style also evolutions. I feel
Yeah.
like because I became a mom it changed and then I was in another era of my life. Now I'm in a completely different era of my life and I'm talking like 10 years. I'm not talking
Yeah.
yesterday or, you know, a year ago.
Yeah.
But I still have clothes that I wore in high school
Like things that you can't get rid of.
because now they fit azul.
Yeah, I know. I think
So
of
it
that
was like
all the
so
time.
it was like some of those things. Also, I'm an immigrant, you know. So like when we came here, we had nothing. I came here with like 3 outfits, and one of them was my Backstreet Boy shirt, by the way.
Do you still have
Huh.
it?
No, somewhere along the lines it got lost.
Yeah.
But I didn't get to wear any of my mom's stuff or my grandma's stuff, which as a lover of vintage, that's still super tragic to me. That you leave everything behind.
Yeah.
And now I get to see both of my girls. Well, Bella just moved, but like they could shop my closet, you know, and wear things. So then I always had this like, I will buy and I wouldn't get rid of it because I was like, you know, she's gonna wear it. I do a lot of like conscious purchases that way.
Yeah. If you think
Like,
you'll pass it down.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm like, are the girls gonna keep it? You know, or actually the 3 of them because Luca can as well.
Yeah.
Shop out of my closet. It's always like that. Like, I'm gonna leave it behind, and because I know also how the garment is made, I know it's gonna last
Yeah.
for them to have it and maybe even pass it on. But yeah, style like it always evolutions. It changes constantly.
That heirloom idea, I feel like that's a big part of preservation is like having things too that are made to last so that you can pass them down, or that iconic piece that you've worn. You know, I love the
Over and
idea.
over.
I love
Yeah.
that idea. I'm the same. Like, I mean, obviously, I'm not an immigrant, but my mom didn't save anything, and we grew up pretty. My parents got divorced when I was 3 or 2, I think. And my mom was a single mom of 3 kids and had no money. And I think she also is like, she's the type of person, it's like, if it's not serving a purpose, it has to go.
It has to go. Yeah.
And she did not save anything. I mean, maybe she has like a Lee denim jacket from like the 90s and like maybe a handful of things, but like
Yeah.
from really like high school and younger, she had some cool stuff. And I see she has cool photos because I've looked at her photos a million times.
Yeah.
She didn't save anything. Even like our baby clothes, she didn't save. And I'm such a nostalgic person.
Yeah.
It bums me out. And I have like a collection of things that I'm like, either like if there's something I wore, like the dress that I wore when Rick and I first went to this wedding together, like I'll always save that, or like, you know, something that has
I
a
do that
memory
too.
attached
Yeah.
to it. And maybe there's like an iconic photo of you. Cause that's how I remember seeing photos of my mom and like wondering like, where's that dress at? I don't know. That's my hope anyways. But then you never know. It's like Georgia could like hate my stuff.
No.
She'll like the vintage stuff. It's like
I look at my mom's photos. I'm like, oh my God, I will be wearing the crap out of that.
I know your mom has such good
every other
style.
day, you know.
Do you feel like her style influenced you at all?
My mom is my whole influence.
Yeah, she's so
And
cool.
when
Your
it
mom
comes
has
in the
cool
fashion
style.
world, like seeing her get ready for events, it was always like magical. And we're talking about like a really good time in our lives, still in Mexico, where like she would go to art events or all this fancy stuff, and
Yeah.
getting ready was like such a beautiful thing to watch. She never had a glam team or any of that stuff because she was her own stylist. She did her own makeup. She was always so good at that. You know, she was also like, you know, a girl from the 80s. So
Yeah.
it was just amazing to see her. And like, I was just talking to Azul about it. I'm like, have you ever seen Abue do her eyelashes? My mom curls her eyelashes with a spoon.
No, she doesn't.
Yes, she does.
Your mom
I
is
was
so
like-
cool.
I was like 5 when like the first time, like I remember vividly and like, and do it with such an ease. And like, my mom is a very graceful woman. So it was just like, like it was
That's
just
cool.
amazing. And yeah, like, yeah, she wore some pretty iconic stuff and
Yeah.
was also like a huge pusher to like just pretty much let me be. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there was like no other way either because I wasn't like gonna go her way. But also, I grew up very tomboyish.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, like I used to hate when she put dresses on me, and she would come from the city and bring me all these beautiful dresses with ruffled socks, and they just itch, and everything was like so uncomfortable.
Yeah. It was like the height of polyester.
Oh yeah, and then I turned out to be
Yeah. Love a dress.
who I turned to be.
You're like the dress lady.
a
That's
dress.
crazy. My mom was the total opposite. No makeup, so casual. I will say though, one thing I love about my mom, she never commented about how we looked ever.
Yeah.
Like we could have had, I mean, I remember some things I wore in high
Me
school.
too.
She never said anything. And I think that that's one reason why I'm a pretty confident person is
Oh, yeah.
because I never questioned.
Yeah.
I was pretty naive to the fact that people might think something of me.
Something about your
I mean,
body.
I grew up in a small town and whatever, but yeah, she never commented on our appearance ever, like in a negative
Yeah.
way. Not even actually, she just really didn't say
Be
anything. I mean, if you look
yourself.
nice, she would say you look nice,
Of
but
course.
she just, which I was like, I feel like that takes a lot of restraint. I mean, maybe it didn't for her, but sometimes now, like, Georgia will pick out outfits, and I do not say anything bad about it, but I'm just like, okay.
Hey,
Now
that's
I'm
how they
thinking
get
her as a
creative, though. You
teenager.
did that.
I know.
You did that, and your mom allowed you to be.
But
like
remember,
that.
I was living in the height of Britney Spears
Yeah. I know.
midriff era. That
Yeah.
was like the
That's a
lowest
lot of
pants,
skin.
the
I
lowest
know.
pants,
I
like
did
the
that too.
most crop tops. I mean, people were basically wearing bras and
Yeah.
underwear jeans. I don't know.
Yeah. No, we were.
My mom was so. That's one thing I love about her is she doesn't really care about that
I
stuff.
love your mom.
Yeah, she's special lady.
Mama Lisa's awesome.
Mama Lisa. Yeah, but I don't have any vivid memories of her like getting ready for like.
Well, like I didn't last very long. Then she came here, and
yeah.
I stayed behind. But yeah, she's a constant reminder why I started loving fashion, and
She still can.
she's still
Usually is like one of the best dressed in the room.
always and forever. And
Yeah.
we'll go to the grocery store. We'll go to Costco. Seriously,
In her
dressed
heels.
up
In her heels.
with a fabulous purse. Like it just doesn't ever stop. And
I love that.
Abner was like, yeah, Azul's just like you. I'm like, I feel like Azul's like my mom.
You think so?
Like it's just there's so much about my mom. Like she collects little things now, Azul.
Yeah.
My mom, that's her jam. Like
Yeah.
the tinier, the better.
Like little trinkets?
Yeah, and like Azul is just like that. Like it's so crazy to see your mom and your daughter.
Yeah.
And the fact that the three of us look so much alike is also a little
No.
trippy, but yeah. This, like, seriously, if you let them be creative, they'll grow up to be,
Creative.
they can wear whatever they want, and they feel so good on their own skin. That's also so very important as a person that didn't grow up feeling good on her own skin.
Yeah.
Make sure that my kids feel like that is very, very important.
Yeah. It is interesting how much what you're wearing affects how you feel and how you present yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And
100%.
this is kind of a random side story, but I remember there was this tiny little period of time when Georgia was going to this other daycare, and there must have been this girl in her class that like always wore like pink and dresses and ruffles. And so of course, like inevitably Georgia was into that. And I fought it for a while because honestly, we just didn't have a lot of pink or dresses because I didn't
Yeah.
buy them forever. But then all of a
Exactly.
sudden she was like,
want
and I
that.
noticed though that if I would just put her in, I eventually just bought some pink stuff because I was like, okay, it was becoming an issue in the morning. If I just put her in that pink dress or I let her put her tutu over her outfit, it was like so much easier to go to school. She was happier to say goodbye to me. It was like her whole demeanor was different. She
Yeah.
just felt better. And it's like, she was like
she felt herself.
3.
Yeah.
It's
It starts very
insane.
early.
It's insane.
It starts
yeah.
very early.
I couldn't believe I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is a thing. She's like in a better mood.
I
because
always
she has that
thought
outfit on.
that I was like, I'll have until like first grade. No,
Yeah, no,
But-
I already noticed it for sure.
it's fun to watch them
Yeah.
grow up and becoming themselves. Before we go, where's your store at? Give us the address and the Instagram handle so people can follow you.
Yes, please follow us. Come and say hi. The shop is on Ingersoll. Our address is 3619 Ingersoll Avenue. It's right by Manhattan Deli. I feel like that's one of the like landmarks in Des Moines. That's
Really,
like,
I was just going to say the bartender's handshake.
well, that's newer.
True.
You know, Manhattan Deli, I feel like
Been there for
all
a
generations
long time.
know about Manhattan
Yes.
Deli. It is right in between Bartender's Handshake and Manhattan Deli.
Yes.
And our Instagram handle is Shop Preservation. The store is just called Preservation, though. That's something that gets commonly confused. People think the store is called Shop Preservation.
Preservation.
I feel like I should have touched more on, like, we should have, I don't know. I feel like I didn't talk
Talk more
enough
about-
about slow fashion.
That's okay.
Sometimes
It's
I
easy
will
to-
say it is hard to articulate.
Yeah.
Really, because it's there's so many things.
Just so broad nowadays.
Yeah.
Too also,
Yeah.
I do want to say, like, preservation is, and this is not because you're my best friend, we've talked about this before, like, preservation has this thing where it makes you feel so comfortable. Obviously, you have cultivated and created that, you and Lily, right? Because Lily is what's Lily's title?
Lily is obviously, she's like a shop girl, but she's at this point she's like brand manager. I would
She's
say.
like super creative, but she's very lovely. Both of you are just so incredible, and you have created such a cute little shop, but also feels like we can always hang out there. And we have a group of friends that does hang out there.
Yeah.
But you make people feel very comfortable right away. Also, you
Thanks.
do that as a photographer, because people with you feel so comfortable right away, even when they don't know you. And I'm very proud of you for creating that.
Thank you.
You're a very talented photographer too. You're my favorite.
That's so nice. Thank you.
But it's true, because you're the only one that gets to take our
Aw,
photos. But the shop is great,
thank you.
and yeah, I'm very proud of you. And I hope everybody goes and shops
Come
or
see the
follows you on
shop,
Instagram. You create
yeah.
awesome content.
We have some really cool events coming up
Oh,
this
exciting!
year.
I love events.
2 years ago, we started the Loop, which is like our secondhand
Yes.
marketplace within our website.
Oh yeah, you guys gotta check out the Loop.
But this year, we're going to focus on like Loop-centric events where we either do like little secondhand markets, or we're going to try to do some
Ooh,
clothing swaps.
exciting.
We have some cool ideas in the works that are
Awesome.
all secondhand focused. So
If you want to start your slow fashion
really,
era,
yes,
here
really
it comes.
trying to like emphasize the accessible side of slow fashion.
Awesome.
So
I love that.
we probably won't stop carrying some of the amazing brands that we offer that are higher price point. But
I mean, luxury once in a while.
yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like, I will say we have a handful of brands that probably sit like kind of at that luxury level.
Yeah.
And then everything else is like investment price point, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's probably luxury.
I do
but
love, and I think it's important to mention, you do have like, what is it, Afterpay?
Yeah.
Which is like, I think for
And
like,
Shop Pay.
and
you know.
Shop Pay, but like, I think
Mhm.
Afterpay kind of like, and Shop Pay are so important for like younger,
Honestly, anybody that's investing.
yeah,
in
anybody
their
that needs to
clothes, yeah.
invest, like it's such like a great way to actually be able to buy your pieces, or buy other designers' pieces,
Mhm.
and then start your closet, your slow fashion closet. But
Yeah.
I'm excited about those events.
Yeah, I mean,
Can't wait to
they're
see
not.
what you create.
I'm excited just for what the future has to hold, and we'll see. I mean,
Awesome.
yeah.
All right,
Thanks for
gotta
having
get going.
me.
I love you. Thank you
love
for
too.
coming.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm happy to.
All right, everybody, go to Preservation and go follow them on Instagram, because they also create amazing content. Thank you.
Lily. Thanks.
This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.